Welcome to the Freedive Cafe, episode 150 with Alexey Molchanov. My name is Donnie, I'm the host of the Freedive Cafe. The Freedive Cafe is the long-form interview podcast that explores the backstories, the training, the challenges, and the combined wisdom and personal philosophies of the world's freedivers. You can find this podcast at freedivecafe.com, freediveandthrive.com, and on all good podcast players, and the show notes can also be found there. You can find me in Dahab, Egypt, the mecca of the worldwide freediving community, where I offer unique freediving courses and training in apnea, breathwork, yoga, and the freediving lifestyle. Come visit me at any time to begin or continue your journey into depth. If you enjoy the podcast, please like the video and subscribe to the channel to keep up to date with new releases. Visit patreon.com/freedivecafe to support the show and access exclusive freediving content. Alexey Molchanov is a multi-world record-holding and world record-breaking freediving athlete and arguably the greatest and most consistent freediving athlete of all time. He first appeared on episode 35 of the Freedive Cafe, so go back and check that out if you haven't heard it yet. And now, let's dive. All right, let's get started. Alexey, it's been more than 5 years since we last spoke on the podcast, which is absolutely mind-bending because I can't believe it myself. And the listeners think it's time we had a little catch-up. That episode was episode 35, so if you want to hear Alexey's history and backstory and the classic Freedive Cafe format, that's the place to start. But this is also the 150th episode of the Freedive Cafe, so I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who's listened to and supported the show over the years. Alexey, you're in Cyprus now, just about to take part in the 31st AIDA Freediving World Championship. First of all, thank you very much for making time to talk to me on the last day before one of the biggest competitions of the year. How was the training day today, and how are you feeling about the competition?
Hey Donnie, thank you for having me. 5 years later, and yeah, it's like it was hard to believe that so many years have passed since our last interview. Like it seems like it was very recent, and a lot changed in those 5 years. And now it's one day before the World Championship starts. Yes, it's a Women's Day tomorrow, so it's first Northern Day for women. For men, it's like one day female starts, one day male starts. So for men, it starts after tomorrow. So we have some time to train still more. For me, it's one of the last. I think it's the last competition of the season, and I'm very ready to rest after this competition because it was like a long season for me, which started in March with variable weight, 156, and then it was May, like in Philippines, I did another like bifin dive, 121, and then it was like France competition with the monofin 133, and it was Bahamas, there was Honduras, and now it's Cyprus, right? So it's like it's exciting competitions conditions so far. Initially, in the first days of training, they were quite challenging, like with some currents. Now they improved, so now we can see that it's like glass-like surface, no waves, no current, and we hope it stays for the next week, for the next 10 days. Same, but in Cyprus, like it could sometimes get worse, and then it might be a bit of current. So let's see. For now, everything is good. Training went well. I have a bit of sinus issue where I try to fix it right now. It's not something that really affects like my dive too much, but it's not pleasant, of course.
Yeah. Well, I hope you get that resolved before you start. And yeah, like you said, it's been a crazy year for you, man. I think it's been one of the biggest years in free diving for records, especially from your side for a while. And it's I can only imagine how like tiring it must be in a sense to come to this point of the year and probably still be able to enjoy the competition, but still have to have a good rest after this, I would imagine. Before we get started with I've been inundated with questions from the Patreon supporters. I've got lots of interesting questions to ask you about training, recovery, and mindset, among other things. But before we get to that, let's not ignore the little elephant in the room and get a couple of difficult questions out of the way first. Yesterday, William Trubridge announced his withdrawal from the competition, stating that he decided not to participate in the event because he didn't believe that the standards of fair play and safety were being upheld. Of course, he's referring to the fact that Vitomir, Maricic, and Petar, Klovar are taking part in the competition, two athletes who have recently been accused of doping, violating Vertical Blue's own doping regulations, and possibly in breach of WADA rules. It's been a very bitter and uncomfortable couple of months in the freediving community as people take sides on this topic. Do you think doping is becoming a problem in the freediving competition scene? And what do you think about the current events?
Well, I think the sport is growing, and there like these type of questions arise and become a problem, of course. And there like the need to continue to improve regulations is there, and William highlights this need. I think it's a good direction where CMAS is going, and we'll see how AIDA is exactly like responding and what is it doing. There is like several, as you said, there is like different views on this, and of course, like I don't support any doping, and it's never been a philosophy like where like it's something that uh, like I think at some point in freediving, everybody was so happy the sport is so small because the doping was never an issue because there was no point to use the doping, like because there
Yeah,
was no
yeah.
like money prizes, etc. So now like
Mm,
and I was starting when it was really small back in 2004. 2004 was my first competition. 2005 was my first world championship. Um, and there it seems like there is a something that is specifically for freediving that could be beneficial, that like a community wants to highlight, and like highlight that some substances are beneficial freediving. They are not in the WADA lists currently for the sports. And to study this topic, I think it's important, right, to understand if it's true, if it's not, what are their what are the studies that support this point of view. So the direction is good to see what do we need as in freediving, like to improve the lists that we have in freediving for the doping. I
mm.
think it's a good direction. How does it? How it's a bit of like a interesting question. How is it all executed right now? Like what? Who is doing what? There is like something that CIMA is doing, something that AIDA is doing, and I'm not studying, like I'm not following closely what exactly, like I'm sure there's a ton of work that each agency is doing to work with this issue. I don't know exactly what they do, like what CMAS precisely do uh, to like solve for this problem, what IRIS precisely do to solve this problem, but I know they do a lot. Like I had some feedback from some officials that there's like just a ton of work to work with this issue. So I think now with this being like very emotional and also
Yeah,
high
yeah.
in resonating issue in the community, these agencies they are pushed to act like in this direction faster, because in the past they were not so active, like even though the community sort of like wanted something to change, right? So then like let's hope they what they do will benefit the sport, right? And now basically I can only like it's up to the sports agency to change regulations, to update the doping list. So basically, it's up to AIDA and CIMAS to act on that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you for your comments on the topic. I know it's a difficult topic to enter into sometimes because it is a very close community. We all kind of know each other, and you know a lot of the athletes know each other and train with each other, and it can be difficult sometimes to talk in an intelligent, in a relaxed and open-minded fashion about the topic. I have a little bit less faith in the freediving organizations, having had a lot of experience and like kind of seeing how they deal with certain topics. I I think that their professionalism is overstated very often and misunderstood by a lot of the general public. But
Yeah, and the resolution of this can be maybe improved and resolved on the current sports agency side. But as well, one of the outcomes of this can be that maybe some other sports agencies will be created, right? So that's like, I think we don't need to like just lock ourselves in the current sports agencies, but be open that one of the outcomes may be that something else is created, which will be with different standards and regulations and maybe better in some ways. And then, yeah, it's like I'm, I'm also looking what they are doing, and based on their actions, everybody will draw conclusions, right? And we'll see.
yes, that's a very good point. Yes, thank you for answering on that, Alexey. Right, let's move on to the less difficult topics and get on to the fun stuff. You've had a pretty exciting year with many world records in depth, 133 in vertical blue, 136 at the CMAS World Championships. Apart from finally having some other competition in the form of Andrei Matvenko and possibly Petar Klovar, what has changed in your approach to training since we last spoke 5 years ago?
There is Davide as well, so I wanted to highlight
Oh,
Davide
sorry,
Carrere.
Davide. Sorry,
Davide
Davide, who's
was
actually Davide will be the next guest on the podcast. He'll be episode 151, so I apologize for missing him there.
nice, nice. Yeah, Davide is. I was very happy to see him doing 130. That means that we're already like with monofin. There is like Andre, there is me, there is Davide. In this particular monofin discipline, there is Arnaud Gerald, who I try to push into the monofin, and he like this year he started to progress with monofin,
Right,
and
finally.
he's already finally, and he's already deeper than with bifins, which is great. And I saw that he has a lot of reserve, and he can dive deeper. So that's great. I think like I'll keep pushing Arnaud to get monofin, like push the monofin discipline deeper. And for me, what changed? I think in general, since the last time we spoke, I had quite a lot of focus on other disciplines. Like monofin was something like a bit on the pause because I was waiting for competition, and now it's there, which is great. But paying a lot of attention to different disciplines, I think overall allowed me um, to improve my like readiness even for my main disciplines, because like being able to dive deep with no fins, like I just increase the confidence so much for other disciplines that I feel like I can do even better results. Like even not focusing too much on monofin, I can continue improving with focusing on their, let's say, no fins or free immersion as well, right? Like that, those were a bit more challenging disciplines this year. Like free immersion was a bit like it was a big jump for me, progressing from my 126 to 133. Then I was able to do this with good training, and no fins was the most challenging. And then while I'm focusing on other disciplines and improving my preparation, like dry preparation, what I do in like on land, what I do in the water, I can feel how it creates this good foundation for my main disciplines as well for the future, for the monofin and bifins. So in general, I think this year was an example of me like doing records in 4 competitive disciplines and also 1 non-competitive, the variable weight, and it was quite intense, but I was able to like almost do everything I wanted. I didn't do the 103 in all fins, but I did 100 in the World Championship, which was like a good result.
So, not so much changing your approach to training, but just training different disciplines and focusing a little bit on different disciplines and spreading out the amazing performances over all the disciplines. That kind of brings us nicely on to the first questions from the amazing people who support the podcast on Patreon. Thank you, guys. My first of all, my darling co-host and patron Jordy Duncan and patron Matthias, long-term supporter of the show. They both wanted to ask if you can describe like your base training phase and a typical week of base training.
It is in the winter, so it's somewhere it starts in like November, December, and all the way to March, sometimes April. So it's a good part of the year, like 5 6 months. It could be like 4 6 months of the year. And then there, I would just focus more on exercises and technique and just rest from the long dives. I wouldn't usually do the long dives almost at all, and focus on their like overall base exercises as well. Some standard ones, some squats, some bench press and pull ups, maintaining their mobility so I don't get stiffer with all those exercises. So the base preparation, a bit of explosive stuff like snatches and like just overall fitness, and do quite a lot of the specific exercises, like exercises for like lately it was no fins, doing a lot of no fins exercises. So it'll be like roughly maybe like 50-50, for uh, generic exercises and for specific exercises, and then closer to the competition it will be like more specific, less generic exercises. And then obviously then when the season starts, it's a lot more diving and less generic exercises. Like then I would redistribute the percentages. But in general, yeah, off season it's a time where I can just rest from high intensity breath holds and focus on general fitness and maintain and improve my technique and form.
Do you do a lot of swimming? Do you still do a lot of, because you come from a swimming background, do you still do a lot of swimming to keep that conditioning? And also, Zoe wanted to know if you think it's important for, or good for beginner freedivers to improve their swimming technique.
It's very important for beginner freediver to improve their swimming technique. I believe like inefficient technique just makes you use more oxygen, right? So if you
Mm-hmm.
want
Mm-hmm.
to use less oxygen, making sure your technique is efficient is the first priority, and working on this a lot is a good way, like to improve your freediving. I don't do so much swimming because I think in general, I'm pretty happy with my current skills in the swimming
Right.
area. The only thing I was improving, like, and spending quite a lot of time, is leg kick. So the leg kick with the
Right.
breaststroke, that was something I was
Okay.
doing a lot. But
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
yeah, but I wouldn't swim like every day. Let's say 5 kilometers. I wouldn't do that. Maybe
Right.
roughly it can be like maybe like 4 or 5 days a week. I could swim up to 3 kilometers. That's usually enough, like altogether combined with their exercises.
Okay. Like sort of like in the warm-ups for the pool session, something like that?
It could be after the pool session. I think if I have usually if I have some breath holds and even like short dives, then I would put the swimming in the end as a
Mm-hmm.
recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes it can be just a session, like a soul session. Just do the swimming, like let's say a morning, like a morning cardio, instead of like running or instead of cycling. Just I would do the swimming, but um, yeah, it's not much. I don't do much of swimming because even 1 kilometer of technique for me is enough. Like it's enough to uh,
Right.
direct my attention to some errors and improve them. For someone who is very new to the technique, for sure, like they need higher volume. Like maybe like look towards like only doing 3 kilometers, like only technique plus something else, like or it's like the separate day, separate session devoted to the technique. Like doing intense technique exercises with intense breath hold exercises is quite tough because
Yeah.
when you pay a lot of attention to the technique, then you're already tired. Like after that, your focus is not there.
I just switched my focus a little bit this year to no fins. Now that I live in Dahab and I have such easy access to the water. When you mentioned there are specific exercises for the leg kick, just as a little treat for myself, because it's, I think, and also for everyone else who struggles with the leg kick, I think it's one of the main technique issues that people have when starting out and continuing in no fins even. Which specific exercise could you recommend, or exercises for that?
Mm, well, to describe it
It's a little bit difficult
through
on
the
audio,
audio,
right?
yeah, it's a bit difficult.
Yeah, but
Um,
like as a general, would you be doing some kind of like a resistance exercise to improve the power generated by the leg kick?
not, I wouldn't focus on the power. I think the one of the main problem is hip mobility, and focusing on the hip mobility and like being able to just do the right kick in terms of the trajectory and where you get your feet, how high you get your feet, how well you can rotate them outwards. That's usually the biggest problem. So power is not the problem. It's much better to focus on their technique in terms of the trajectory and the range of motion. So the range of motion is the problem, and with no fins, important part is to keep your knees safe, because sometimes if you start to do exercises very actively and try to improve the technique to like without much warm up or without being ready with your knees, then some injuries are possible. So you don't want to risk knee injury, but you still want to work on their range of motion and this hip rotation.
So you mentioned that your swimming might be part of the recovery. On the topic of recovery, we have a question from Maurice here. At Vertical Blue this year, you had some problems and a deep blackout in CNF after the 2 dives to 133 meters in free immersion and constant weight. You mentioned in an interview that the recovery time was probably too short. And then less than a month later in Roatan, you still did 3 amazing dives in just a few days with no problems. Can you talk a little bit about your approach to recovery in general? And did something change in your recovery protocols between the 2 events?
Yes, I did change quite some things, and in both recovery and even some small details, like in the technique, in their timing of the leg kick, and some small details. But in general, in the Vertical Blue, I had 2 deep dives, to 1 to the freeze, and I think that was the biggest contributor, like to me not being able to recover after those dives, because before those dives, I had a very clean 100-meter dive in training already in Vertical Blue, just like within a week time before these dives, and I had a bit of a problem to recover in Bahamas, because I have my procedures. Like I want to have access to the gym, like proper facilities, to have a bit of cardio, to have a bit of strength training, even if it's light strength training. I like to do a bit of strength training, like even during the competition for recovery. And it's just not available in Bahamas. And I tried to like do some rubber, like elastic band training, but it didn't work so well. And then in Honduras, it was available. I had access to a really good gym, and plus I was resting. Like I did another 1 day, like before the no fins, and I didn't do a free immersion to not to get tired. So like in comparison to Bahamas, like I skipped free immersion, and my first discipline in actually, you know, I skipped free immersion because it was like a 2 days before the no fins. I still did monofin. And then it was 2 full days to rest, and it was enough. So definitely it was less intense. Like I was tired less, and I was recovering
Right.
more in Honduras, and also I had access to the good facility, so I could do my routine, which I believe like helps me to recover better. So yeah, like these tweaks allowed me to do the 100-meter dive, like even in this like higher stress situation. I think 100 meters in the World Championship, like where it's just 1 dive, and then if I sort of like do it wrong, then I will not be allowed to dive in the next bifin day. So altogether, like it was quite like much more stressful than doing this in Vertical Blue. Like Vertical Blue is sort of like easier. So I was very happy like with this 100-meter World Championship dive. I think so far the deepest World Championship dive was like 94 or something. So it was a good jump like to the for their.
And it was amazing to watch, man. We were all sitting here and we were sitting over at Dahab Freedivers, and we were watching it and absolutely blowing our minds. So thank you for the incredible
You're welcome.
incredible no fins entertainment. But in general, you're a big fan of active recovery. Doing something after the big dive days, getting the blood pumping around the body, keeping the muscles active, rather than just like going and lying on your bed all day and watching Netflix.
Correct. And I think it also depends on the body type, because I have a bit a bit more muscles. Like I'm 180, but I'm like 85 plus, sometimes even 90 kilograms of weight. So my build is more on the heavy side. Like I have lots of muscles in the legs, and if I lay, I feel like I lose the muscle tone, which might be not the same for everyone, right? Some guys who will be a bit more like slim, maybe like taller and slimmer, they might not have a problem like I have, right? Maybe just like they can just exactly lay on the bed and watch Netflix, and then they can be really in a good shape, like, and perform really well. So it's something that every freediver need to like test and study and see what works best for him, for his body type, for his nervous system as well. Like this is like something I learned with my what is the best for my nervous system and my body, but it can change from person to person.
Okay, so moving from the topic of recovery into the topic of lung squeeze, which over the years that I've done this podcast, it's a topic that I approach more and more and more, and definitely want to get your thoughts on lung squeeze. The first question is from Emil, who wants to kind of know about your experience with lung squeeze and how has it changed over the years? Did you get more or less through the years, and how have you dealt with them?
I certainly reduced the number of long quizzes, and in the very beginning of my freediving career, like even before it was considered like dangerous, after their incident with Nicholas Mivoli, of course, I was already freediving for like 8 years. I started in 2004, like 9 years, and obviously I had some lung squeezes before that, but they were never too like maybe too severe. I had one very big lung squeeze in Kalamata when Stephen Keenan saved me from like 40 meters when I had vertigo. So I was losing my orientation because I removed my nose clip at the bottom, and I got a bit of vertigo happening. But other than that, even if I had some squeezes, I could adjust and like understand where it comes from. Like if I was tense, if my ribcage was tense, and adjust the position, improve the relaxation, and then in the next dive, like which could be within a week time frame, I could have zero like squeeze, like no squeeze at all. So I was always be able to like pinpoint what is the reason for this, and then there are several reasons. There's like equalization issue, then the technique of equalization. That is something that I always was quite good at. Then it's contractions based because of like various reasons. Maybe it's a reaction to the pressure. Maybe it's an efficient technique. Like on the way down, you get already tired, and like also CO2. So because I had good technique, I was able to narrow down like the reason quite well, right? For a lot of people, it could be multiple reasons, and it's maybe a bit harder to pinpoint what is the main reason for the lung squeeze. But yeah, there are those variables like equalization, reaction to the pressure, contractions because of the pressure, contractions because of the like just inefficient technique and lots of CO2. So improving technique in general will help with contractions as well, right? Like using less energy, being more relaxed on the way down, like that. And then yeah, also having contractions on the way up, because if you have contractions on the way up, like too many of those, that also contributes to the lung squeeze. Plus, their breathing muscles, like breathing muscles in general, if there is a attention to the development of the breathing muscles, like diaphragm stretches and the breathing muscles, like mobility of their rib cage, that also helps, right? If there is no exercises done, then that's one of the main thing that person can do, like start doing breathing exercises.
Yeah, and so I was going to ask you about how important you think, like what I always tell people, the mobility of the breathing muscles and mobility, the ability to move freely, the diaphragm and the breathing muscles. And you seem to be on board with the idea of training that specifically, correct?
Yeah, it's. I think doing the breathing exercises is one of the first steps. Like it should be done at the very beginning of the freediving career, like in the very first classes, and then continuously practiced in their advanced classes. And that's what from what I see right now, it's not uh, so so common among freedivers to be doing those. Everybody tries to improve their equalization, maybe technique, and like get deeper really fast, and then like have not enough of foundation to cope with the pressure, right? So like I was doing the breathing exercises, like that was a part of this preparation we did. My mother did initially, and it was part of this education, like always since the very beginning. So I did a lot of those exercises in the very beginning of my career, and I have good awareness of the breathing muscles, and that helps a lot.
Yeah, we had we had this exact conversation today with myself and some coaches, and yeah, it seems like before it was maybe almost a little bit like cool or popular to be doing the breathing exercises, to do that kind of thing, and then like you say, a lot of people seem to, when they hit a wall in their equalization ability, they tend to maybe sometimes come to the conclusion that they need to improve their equalization technique before or without realizing that maybe they need to improve the ability of the air to be able to come up into their mouth so that they can equalize. Would you agree with that?
That it's a ability to transfer air better and easier from the lungs to the mouth, and it's not only the transfer of the air and equalization, but it's also ability to understand the pressure and like feel if there's any resistance to the pressure better, because if there's any like pushback due to the like less awareness or like not such good awareness of breathing muscles, then that contributes to the squeeze. So it's management, air management for equalization, but as well as just general relaxation and ability to feel the pressure.
Yeah, this very nicely brings us in now to the last question on this topic, which the question was presented by Bizo Silva. Bizo was actually a guest on the show. I think it was episode 137, an expert in lung ultrasounds. We went into a very deep conversation about lung health and squeezes and all that kind of thing. So check that out if you want to know more. Bizo was saying that during Vertical Blue, because he was there at the competition, he did a quick presentation on lung squeeze for the athletes. When I went over the importance of relaxation during contractions to prevent squeeze, you, Alexey, mentioned a technique you use to actively move your chest wall and diaphragm towards the direction of the contraction, not simply relaxing into them. He says, "This is fascinating to me. Can you please explain more?"
Yeah, we talked with Bizo, and it was pretty like interesting conversation, and it was a great presentation from them about the lung squeeze. And there is like one way, there's a way to react to the contractions where if you look how your chest moves and how your abdominal muscle contract when you do the contraction, there is a possibility that it's not maybe the same movement with everyone. Again, you need to understand how your contraction uh, is like working. What do you do when you have contractions? Because you might be expanding the rib cage, like when you have contractions. Maybe it's like it's a movement where you almost do involuntary inhale, right? So your rib cage is opening, and then that causes like a lot of problems, especially at depth. So if you like have contraction, feels like it's more like in the chest, maybe in the upper part of the chest, then it's a contraction that you want to work with, and like almost get your, instead of getting your chest like uh, moved in the direction of like inhale, try to push the air almost like towards the lower part of the lungs and push your belly slightly outward, and that increases the pressure in the lungs, right? So it's like it is a subtle difference, but that's a technique like of doing the contractions. So if you realize like you can actually improve the technique or change the technique how you do the contractions, so you can do them a different way. You can like expand
Mm-hmm.
your
Mm-hmm.
rib cage, or you can like compress your rib cage and move the air a bit
Right.
more into the
Uh-huh.
lower part, and then you can practice that in static breath holds. And I think I was observing these two different types of contraction when I was doing a lot of static, like back in the days when I was doing like repetitive series, like some breath holds in the range of 8:30 or 9 minutes, a lot of repetitions. Then I was studying the contraction, and that's a good time to understand what contraction is. Like if there is not enough experience with contraction, maybe there's not enough pool training, not enough static training to actually have a lot of them and understand how do you do them. So expanding the rib cage, and if you have the contractions which you don't understand, or you can't make them softer, or can't make them like less intense, and just understand that you don't open your rib cage, then this is the area to focus on.
Yes, so kind of like guiding the contractions as they come.
Guiding them and not being affected by them too much. If you understand the contraction and you have a certain technique of doing contraction from practicing them, for example, during the static breath hold, then they will be very familiar, they'll be nicer, they'll be softer, and you might not expand your rib cage as much as if you would probably do, like if you don't have this technique. So like it's sort of like tweaking the contraction technique and understanding what do you do first, and then like understand if you need some improvements. Some people just have like the contractions more in the belly area right away. They don't move the rib cage. But some people, they do move rib cage much more, right? So, and then this is the area, it's like a technique. So you work on the contractions technique, basically, make it better.
Fascinating. Yes. Thank you for answering that. So in the interview we did 5 years ago, I asked you, do you think we are coming close to the limits of how deep we can dive? And you said no. You said that you didn't have much motivation to beat your own records, but as soon as someone comes close to your records, I think we'll see an upgrade of the records every year. And that seems to be like what we're seeing now. And we talked about the possibility of diving 140 meters, which seemed quite wild at the time, and even 150 meters. And you were actually quite very open to that idea, and you correctly guessed that 140 meters wasn't such a fantastical number, because we've seen you dive 136 last month. So it seems like 140 is just around the corner for you, so to speak. And we've heard about, another diver doing it in training. It's a question of, you said, it's a question of hypoxic resistance and tolerance, because for you, equalization is no problem at all. Do you feel like your hypoxic limit is simply increased every year due to consistent training, or do you constantly have to seek new and interesting ways to stimulate that adaptation?
I think every year my hypoxic ability improves. I don't, as of yet, I don't have to seek for the very interesting ways to improve it, because as I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, it seems to improve while I'm focusing on the no fins, right? So I'm I'm focusing on the no fins, and because it's not such a easy discipline for me, for my body type, with my length of arms and legs, some other athletes having longer arms, longer legs have some benefit, right? So for me, for my body type, fins discipline are more natural. So when I'm focusing on the no fins, which is a harder discipline for me, always have been, I think I just, with this, studying new disciplines, I already improved my hypoxic abilities enough for my other disciplines. And that's why I was able to progress to 136 without being hypoxic. And I definitely see how I would be able to do 140. It could be in the near future, right? It's not a few years ago. It's probably within the next months or a year, it's going to be there. And then it will be on the way to 150. So maybe in 5 years from now, maybe we'll be already talking about what is there, 150 plus.
150 is normal now. Yeah. Okay. 160 then. Okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, that's a good point you make there. I think a lot of, of course, a lot of us, sometimes we shy away from training no fins, because it's difficult, and technically it's difficult, and we have to put so much more into the the development of the technique. But perhaps it would be, this is a good motivation to spend a bit more time on no fins, especially if you are diving quite deep and you're starting to reach some kind of hypoxic limit. That maybe rather than trying to do other special exercises, that no fins might be a key towards improving that.
There's a summary. Yeah, yeah, I would agree with I would agree with that. I think in general, no fins is a great way to study swimming technique. Like a lot of freedivers, they like get comfortable with free immersion, like using the rope or swimming with fins in like depth and the pool, or focusing like on the static breath hold. But then no fins requires like good swimming skills, and that's interesting. That's good for uh, like just to have ability to free dive, like even without fins, right, in the open sea or
Right,
in the pool.
right, yeah.
So it's a step. It's a hard step. A lot of people shy away from this. Like it's correct, but I think like a next step for professional community. Like I think a lot more instructors have to learn no fins and become better with
Yeah.
no fins, because if instructor is good and we have more and more teachers around the world who are really good with no fins, then naturally they'll be a better teacher and like will for their students, and then students will also progress better. So I think it all starts from the professional community.
Yeah, 100%. And this is it's a really it's funny that we talk about this, because I actually had a few days ago my very first ever hypoxic episode. Let's say it was a very minor, tiny little shake at the end of a no fins dive. I was doing 45, which I've done before, no problem. But this time the conditions were really terrible, and maybe started playing around with like experimenting with the technique on the way up, and it was just a very minor thing, but it was the first time I'd ever had an LMC in 7 years of freediving, and it really made me really humbled, made me realize that I had until I had that experience, I wouldn't be able to relate to so much to others who had it, and very much reinforced my desire to get better in no fins and get stronger in no fins. So
Yeah, it's exactly like it makes you humble when you have really good skills with other disciplines, then you start to do no fins, and then you like closer to the beginning phase, right? And same with me. Like I had my ways, like I had my recovery routine with other disciplines, and I could dive more days in a row. I could rest less, and then with no fins, I had to adjust because I need to have more days of rest before the no fins and after strength exercises, and it was like learning something new. Everything that worked well with free immersion, bifins, monofin, it needed some adjustment for the no fins.
next topic is narcosis. So I'm a diver who started experiencing symptoms of narcosis since I passed 60 meters, which was sometime last year. Um, it's definitely improved now in the 70s. I know that others were much deeper before they first experienced it, or even haven't felt it at all. What is your own experience with narcosis as you've dived deeper and deeper? And do you develop adaptation to it?
Um, I think I think it's definitely a question of time. Time, more years of experience help with narcosis. Every year for me, it's like less of an issue. And in my first years, when I was reaching first 100 meters, 60 meters, 70 meters, and towards 100 meters, I could feel like it's very unusual sensations. It's like a buzz in my body. My nervous system reacts to it, like in a way where I almost felt like uh, my arms are like slightly shaking, but they didn't. If I look at my arm, it doesn't shake. So I felt this weird sensation in my nervous system. And then with more repetition, like more years, it's just less and less. I sort of can relax into this sensation more, right? So it's like learning how to stay relaxed, how not to react. That's something which helps with the intensity of narcosis. It might even start earlier. I think we just there were some studies like there are some like very few studies going on right now, and in one of the studies it seems like there is narcosis already at 30, 40, 50 meters. It's just very mild, right? There is just you become slower, you have less um, like a slower reaction to things. And I think preparation as well before the dive, in general, how afraid are you if you have some issues with skills equalization, if there's an anxiety, like for example, like what if equalization will not work? What if my technique is not good enough? So if there's some anxiety that intensifies the narcosis as well. So like becoming better in 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 the skills which make you worried helps, right? If you become more confident, then it helps to stay calmer, and that will help with the control with the narcosis.
Well, that's it's good to know that it has become less of an issue for you over the years, and I also really like how you talk about this in terms of years, because I think sometimes people tend to try to solve all their issues in too short a time frame, and actually maybe it's years of free diving that they need. Now, we
Hmm.
come on to some more psychologically oriented questions as we sort of finish up the questions here. So I have a question here from Chris, wonderful up and coming diver who did his Wave 3 course with me here in Dahab. He wants to know, how do you ensure you're in a good place mentally before a dive? For example, could you walk us through your dive day routine and the process before the official top and the thoughts that you have waiting at the start zone?
I think being in a good place before the dive again comes from um, understanding that I'm well prepared to the dive in general with all my trainings before. If I know I'm ready for the dive because of my technique, equalization technique, like swimming technique, my um, my breathing exercises, my lungs shape, it's very easy to prepare for the dive. You go, like everything is like very straightforward. You just do like whatever routine you used to do, like breakfast, like a little bit of stretch, then breakfast, then go, dress, dive, right? So everything becomes very easy. So if you look why some on some days the dive become very hard and it's harder to concentrate and like stay calm, it's not because the routine is off or like something is wrong. Like it's not. Like, I think it's a wrong place to find to like look for the solution, right? If you
Hmm.
sort of like think that the routine and the pre-start routine is the key, I would say it's wrong, right? So the pre-start routine is very simple. It's like just like show up and dive and like eat whatever, do some small things, and then it's only when there is anxiety and uncertainty and like people like subconsciously are like a bit of afraid of the dive because they know maybe there something is going to be their skill is not enough, then
Right.
everything becomes so much harder, right? Because then sort of like you look for their perfect preparation, you look for their the perfect routine, and it's an illusion. There is no such thing, right? There is no preparation routine which will fix the lack of skill which should be created like within months of work before. So um, it's everything should be very easy. Sort of like if I know my technique is really good, my position is good, I just show up and for the world record dives, even with monofin 136, I just like I don't do anything special. I wake up, eat my porridge, like do the breathing exercises, or even skip them. I don't care, right? It's not the time to do some exercises. I already did all that like years and years before that, so I don't need to do anything. I just eat and dive, right? Or sometimes I don't need to eat. Like okay, I usually have a bit of carbs before I dive, but sometimes I skip it. Like not a big deal. I can wake up. Like sometimes if the start is early, like say 8 o'clock or 8:30 or 9, and I go to bed late. Let's say go to bed at 1 a.m. Then I wake up like 1 hour before the start, just like or training if it's a deep training, let's say, or like 1.5 hour before the start, just to pack and go, be in time. Like I can even like have no time to properly do my routine because like I just want to sleep a bit more. Like I went to bed at 1 a.m. and like I wake up at 8, like slept 7 hours, and I go directly to the start and whatever. I just do my dive and it can be a world record dive, right? And who cares about those routines? It's not important. Like it's only becomes important when you try to compensate for your insecurities because of lack of the technique, lack of equalization, and lack of their and that's it. Like if you feel that, like pay attention to what you do months and months before the competition. And if there is an anxiety before the dive, scale down. Like manage your expectations. You're not ready, right?
Fantastic answer. I love it. And finally, before we move on to the desert island questions, a question that was asked in a very similar way by patrons Bevan Reynolds, who was actually the last guest on the podcast, Michaela Werner, and Sandra, who's training here with me now in Dahab. And they basically asked the same question, which was, do you think about your mum when you dive? What do you think she would have to say about the way the freediving scene has changed in the last few years? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, of course, I think a lot about my mom when I dive, and especially when I'm in locations where we dove together. So I think like going somewhere, some places where we had like trainings together or competitions together. Like it's very. I have very fond memories of these places and of this time, and it's an interesting. I think exercise, like mental exercise, to check okay what she would think about it. And freediving is definitely like in a different position right now than when she was freediving, when she was when she was in the phase where it was just starting to develop, and it was first depth world championship 2005 in Nice in France when she participated. And I think it's the interesting part of my mom initial view on freediving is that she was always actually a bit worried that what happens when freediving grows and more people will freedive because of like people getting injured, and like some people like die because of like just because the sport become bigger, and like in sports, like even in normal sports like triathlon, Ironman, right? People just like die because of health issues. And and then I think she was worried about it in general. And I, in this regard, I can, from my side, I think I'm a bit more open for the sport to grow and to deal with issues, and like okay to understand that like what have to be done for the sport to become safer, even if it become bigger. So I think just comparing the current state of sport to the state of sport like 10 years ago is interesting mental exercise, and there's certainly some learnings when I think about it. Yeah, I think it's just hard to do any, like I think with this answer, with this question, it's more abstract, right? It's not something I can maybe precisely like tell you what I think, but it's in short, of course, I think about my mom, especially in locations where we dive together, and there is a strong foundation that she created in terms of the education system and philosophy, and what I like go back to and revisit when I think, okay, how education should evolve, like what is the next step, and when we work with a team, our like education team, like how do we continue building on top of what was already like created by her.
Yeah, so thank you so much for answering these questions, Alexey. It was really exciting to be able to get you on the show again after all these years. And I was really surprised when I spoke with Sophia that you were like, yeah, we can do it on Wednesday. And I was like, wait a minute, is the competition not starting like right now? Like, usually people are like they say like, oh no, I can't do it for the next month because I'm training for the competition and I need time to rest and blah blah blah. And like here you are, deepest man in the world, taking time out at a very busy and important time of the week. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome, Danny.
Thank you. Just to take us out, and I'm not sure if we had this question on the first episode back in those days, if we did this question, but this is, the most well-known Freedive Cafe question now, and that is, Alexey, can you say in just a few words, why do you freedive?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I I think I think it all starts from childhood, and when I was a kid, I just was lucky enough to start like traveling and doing some like summer adventures when I was 5 years old, and it all starts from there because I was so happy in the sea, right? And then when freediving as a sport started to develop, and I was 17 years old, I just wanted to continue doing this, like and compete, and I enjoy very much this development process where I can improve some skills and see the result. So there is a competitive part of freediving which I enjoy a lot, and I'm very competitive in general. And there is an adventurous part of freediving which I enjoy a lot because of this adventures I had as a kid. So I think it's complex, right? It's like a lifestyle. It's not the sport which is very like narrow. It's quite broad, and I enjoy different parts of freediving: adventurous, competitive part, like making some creative part, doing some pictures and traveling, like diving with different animals. So it's just so many things to do in freediving, and I think I just keep exploring, and that's why.
Alexey, thank you again so much for coming on. We all wish you amazing dives in the upcoming competition. And yeah, dive safe. Have a wonderful time. And I'll talk to you again, hopefully not in 5 years' time.
Thank you very much, Donnie. Thank you guys for listening, and yeah, let's talk sooner.
That was Alexey Molchanov. Absolutely stoked to have that chat. And what I love about talking to Alexey is that everything is just straight up without any fancy flowery bullshit, just facts, wisdom, knowledge, direct experience. Yeah, let's hope it's not 5 years before we chat again. Keep up to date with me on Instagram, Freedive and Thrive. Join me here in Dahab if you're interested in courses or training. Go to freediveandthrive.com or email me at donnie@freediveandthrive. If you are a Patreon supporter, the first Q&A episode will be out mid-October, and then it's going to be early release for you guys, and then probably a week later we put it out to the general public. If you are a Patreon supporter, don't forget to join the WhatsApp group, the private one, because that's where we're having most of the chats now, and I'm giving most of the information, because Patreon, as much as I love Patreon, it's a pain in the ass to use the dashboard. It's not very good for communicating. A WhatsApp group allows me to do that on the go anywhere, no problems. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think we're going to leave it at that. We look forward to episode 151 with Davide Carrera. Probably going to be 2 or 3 weeks, since it's going to be a video version of the interview. And then next will be Frank Pernet. Frank is an expert specializing in lung squeeze and is currently doing his PhD in collaboration with AIDA World. So that's going to be a sciencey episode that's coming up. Erika herself is coming back to Dahab in October, and we're hoping to do some collaboration with the study that she is doing. For the deep dive episodes, I really want to get into Paula Johnson's collaboration on freediving and female menstrual cycles and hormones and things like that. Katarina Sadurska is coming back to the podcast. There's a lot of stuff going on. I'm also going to be slowly releasing the archived episodes that never made it out over the last couple of years. There were training talk episodes from a whole bunch of people. I got a lot to do, and you know me, I don't set dates anymore because I'm useless at keeping them and I'm too busy, but I'm going to keep working on the podcast, trying to make it as good as possible. Okay, love you guys. Dive safe.